The Strangers Chapter 1, the first chapter in a brand new trilogy of films, just got a release date in 2024. Let's talk a little bit about it.
Because you were home.
Coming from Deep Blue Sea director Renny Harlin, The Strangers Chapter 1, Chapter 2, and Chapter 3 are supposedly all coming out next year, which is completely insane and smells very Fear Street-y to me. But yesterday, we officially got the first release date for The Strangers Chapter 1 coming out on May 17th, 2024. Let's play that brand new clip, baby. We also got this creepy as hell first image yesterday that is truly scaring the hell out of me. Could you imagine all three of these people rolling up to your front door? Nope. Starring in The Strangers Chapter 1 is Madeline Pesh from Riverdale, Froy Gutierrez from Hocus Pocus 2, Rachel Shenton from The Silent Child, Emma Horvath from Rings of Power, and Gabe Basso. The Strangers Chapter 1 is said to be a remake of the 2008 Brian Bertino cult classic. It stars Madeline Pesh, who drives cross-country with her longtime boyfriend, played by Froy Gutierrez, to begin a new life in the Pacific Northwest. When their car breaks down in Venus, Oregon, they're forced to spend the night in a secluded Airbnb where they are terrorized from dusk till dawn by three masked strangers. I'm very excited, but also very hesitant with The Strangers Chapter 1. I love both of these movies a bunch, but for totally different reasons. The first one, for instance, I think is just a really creepy, grounded story about three strangers invading these people's home, and they never really give a reason why except for because you were home, which really isn't a motive. That's the scariest thing about that first one. I love it. And this is said to be a remake of specifically that first one, where the sequel by Johannes Roberts definitely gets a little more like stylistic and maybe even a little goofy at times, but it still has that grounded, scary energy to it. My rule of thumb, principle, whatever you want to call it when it comes to remakes, is just not to do the same thing twice. That's boring as hell. I already have The Strangers on my shelf. I don't need to buy it again. Director Renny Harlin has made some comments about the upcoming film that makes me think they didn't make enough changes to make this remake stand on its own. Talking about the new trilogy he's set to direct, Renny Harlin says, "I read it and I was just blown away by it. I called him like, this is incredible, but what, it's 280 pages long?" He said, "Yes, we want to make 3 movies. That's when I understood the whole scope of this and that the idea here was to have a first movie that basically is a fairly faithful remake of the original film, but seen now in today's world, 15, 16 years later." I think that, myself included, a lot of the fans of the original film, all these years, we were asking ourselves and our friends, like, why? Why did this happen? Who are these senseless killers? Who are they? Why were they doing this? The original movie ends with them just driving away, and you're like, what? To be able to make 3 movies where we start exploring the reasons, because even if the senseless acts of violence happen in our world, happen in America all the time, unfortunately, there's got to be some reason behind it. So that gives us a fairly decent outline of what the next 3 movies are set to accomplish. This first one is to be a remake, so to say, of that original movie, hopefully just capturing the tone and not being like beat for beat the same thing, but just add an Airbnb in the modern day. Fingers crossed that's not the case, but I'm real worried about that. And then the next 2 movies are said to give the strangers a reason for why they're killing. I personally feel like this misses the point of why that original movie was so scary. I love Pray at Night so much because Johannes Roberts gave his own injection of flavor to it and made it something new and original. I've heard some fans of the original film say they don't like Pray at Night because it's too over-stylized, but for me, I really enjoy it because it's not the same movie again. From what I'm getting from director Renny Harlin, it just seems like there's 2 big reasons why they're making this trilogy, both reasons that I'm just not crazy about. Chapter 1 is said to be a remake of the original film, but in the modern day, using modern technology, probably. It's also set in an Airbnb. The situation is a little different, so that means the drama between our 2 main characters will be something different than what we got in the original film. It almost feels like they're merging the 2 storylines of Pray at Night and the original film together, because you have these characters who are going on this cross-country road trip, just like in Pray at Night, but it's a couple opposed to a big family. So the relationship of the characters is going to be very similar to the Brian Bertino film, but like the overall like plots and like what the story's going to be, probably more similar to Pray at Night. Does that make it something new though, by joining the 2 of the story elements from the other 2 films together? I hope so, but that can also come off as you're covering the same ground again. If we're just hitting the same beats as that original movie, but also missing the point, it's gonna be The Exorcist Believer all over again. Rennie also talked about wanting to give the strangers a reason as to why they're doing this in the next two movies. Talking about the second and third chapters, Rennie Harlan says, so not to trivialize it or spell it out too much, the second and the third movies are an exploration of where did this come from. More than anything, they are the exploration of what could happen to a person, in this case, a young woman who is the victim of such senseless violence. What does that do to you mentally and physically, and what's your journey after that? The thing about that quote as well is it's basically a spoiler, so Madeleine Petsch is going to live through this first movie. Not a whole lot of suspense there. This is another reason why you shouldn't announce sequels until you just do the first movie and people like it. Like, what if this comes out and it absolutely sucks? People hate it. It's the same thing as what's going on with The Exorcist Believer right now, man. That got review bombed. The majority of people did not like it. Now we have no idea if the next two movies are even happening or not. In fact, there's rumors right now that director David Gordon Green won't even be attached to the next two movies. Giving the strangers a bigger motivation than because you were home, I feel like is a big mistake. You might remember a trilogy of films in a well-established slasher franchise that tried to give a reason for why its respective killer is doing what it's doing, and that flopped pretty hard. While there are some fans of the Thorn trilogy, most people would say that these are some of the weakest Halloween films. The funniest thing about the Thorn trilogy to me is that it's not really a trilogy. Like, it's really just the back half movies that try to explain who Michael Myers is, where 4 feels almost like a remake or a requel to the original film. Does that sound familiar? Almost exactly the same as what Rennie Harlan is describing this brand new trilogy to be. While there are things I like about Halloween's 5 and Curse of Michael Myers, I think that the goal of these films are the biggest problems with them. They wanted to explain that Michael was part of this cult, that's why he's supernatural and all that. That's boring, man. We don't even see Michael for most of Curse of Michael Myers. That sucks. Curse has some interesting ideas that they throw in there. The whole thing about like Michael's able to transfer his evil to other people, something that Halloween Ends would expand upon many years later. But it's the definition of overcomplicating something. I love that Michael Myers, just like how John Carpenter has explained about him, is just this evil force of nature that you can't really understand, goes beyond logic. Why can't the strangers be the same thing? Like, this franchise should just be the strangers popping up in a bunch of random different locations in that gross old truck going after people. There's also other questions I would love answered about the strangers besides why they're doing this. For instance, why does Dollface go up to the door every single time and ask for Tamara? Who is Tamara? For me personally, I'd rather know more about that versus why they're doing it. Maybe you could give us an idea of why they're doing it through that storyline, but that's not 100% clean cut exactly that. From the way that Rennie Harlan's talking about, it just seems like they're going to give us this definite reason, which I guarantee you is not going to be more interesting than the mystery that's already been presented. Some people like to say that this is lazy writing to not give your killers a real motive. To me, I think it's absolutely horrifying. There is a glimmer of hope because in that last quote, it seems like he's talking much more about like her as a main character. So while that aspect to this next film will totally be spoiled, I imagine her boyfriend's going to die and she's going to live at the end of this next movie, we might be exploring her character going through all of this shit multiple times versus an explanation of the killer characters, which if that's the case, I'll take it. That's cool. Focus on that. It's really gonna blow if we end up getting the Cult of Thorns trilogy for the strangers here with these next 3 movies, but I'm hoping that that's not what they do. I'm hoping that Rennie Harlan is true to his word about it being more about Madeleine Petsch's character than the strangers themselves. But that's just my opinion. What do you guys think about the strangers? Do you want an explanation to finally understand why these characters are doing these evil, senseless acts of violence? Leave me something about it in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching this brand new update on The Strangers Chapter 1. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more horror movie content in the future. Please consider supporting this page on Patreon as well by clicking that link in the description below. And as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.